All right, welcome back. So in our first step, we figured out identity, who the player really is. Then in our second step, we set the direction, that North Star pulling us forward. But today we have to face the terrain. Analysis is the big reality check. It's what grounds our strategy in actual evidence, so it doesn't just become, wishful thinking. This is where the rubber really meets the road. So let's dive in.
And this quote is the core rule we have to live by in this layer. See, analysis isn't just some boring step in a process. It's the strategic filter. Its goal is simple, but it is incredibly powerful. To move us from what we wish were true to what hard, verifiable evidence tells us is true. It takes all the infinite things we could do and narrows them down into a legitimate, evidence-based space of what we can do. Think of it like this. We know who the player is. That was identity. We know where they're trying to go. That's our direction. So what's next? Well, now we have to map the actual terrain they need to cross to get there. And that, right there, is analysis, the third critical layer of our strategic operating system. So, our first section is all about that reality check. I want you to think of this as the bridge from what we want to do to what we can actually do. We are systematically, piece by piece, moving from the world of dreams into the world of cold, hard evidence. This makes sure our strategy is built on a solid foundation, not just on wishful thinking. So where do we start this reality check? We start by looking in the mirror. Before we can even begin to map the world outside, we need a brutally honest inventory of what we've got on the inside, all the tools, the assets, and the structures that we actually control. Let's take a look at how these pieces build on each other. What's so cool here is that this isn't just a random list. It's a value chain of strength. It all starts with your basic resources, your inputs. But resources are pretty useless without capabilities, the processes that actually make them productive. Now, the real magic happens when a capability becomes a core competency. So how do you know if you have one? Well, it's got to pass the VRIO test. Is it valuable? Is it rare? Is it hard to imitate? And crucially, is your organization actually organized to exploit it? If you can say yes to all of that, you've got a true competitive weapon. And the final level? That's dynamic capabilities, the meta skill of adapting on a fly, sensing shifts in the market, seizing opportunities, and transforming your organization before you're forced to. But here's the thing. Assets and capabilities alone, they're not enough. We have to talk about culture. And I don't mean culture as some soft, fuzzy concept. No. Following the work of the great Edgar Schein, we have to treat culture as a hard, structural variable, something that can either supercharge your strategy or kill it dead in its tracks. Culture has 3 levels, kind of like an iceberg. The first one is the tip, the part you can actually see above the water. These are the artifacts. This is all the stuff you can see, hear, and feel when you walk into an organization. The way the office is laid out, the dress code, the stories that people tell each other. It's the surface level of culture. Okay, just below the surface, we find the espoused values. This is what the organization says it believes. These are the mission statements, the corporate values you see on posters, the official strategies announced at the big company meetings. It's the organization's declared identity, how it wants to be seen. And this brings us to the most powerful level, the one that's deep beneath the waves, the underlying assumptions. These are the unconscious, taken-for-granted beliefs and values that actually drive day-to-day decisions and behaviors. This is what people do when no one's looking. This is the true cultural core. And this right here brilliantly illustrates why understanding that deep level is absolutely non-negotiable. The logic is just unforgiving. If your strategic choice requires agility to compete, but the deepest underlying assumption in your culture values stability above all else, well, your strategy is doomed. The culture will reject the change like a foreign body, and execution will fail. It doesn't matter how brilliant the plan looks on paper. Okay, so with a firm grip on our internal reality, we now turn our gaze outward. It's time to scan the external environment, mapping both the broad macro forces that are at play and the specific competitive landscape of our industry. To map this vast terrain, we use something called the STEEPLED framework. Think of it as a compass that forces us to look in 8 key directions. We scan for social shifts, like changing consumer values. We look at technological disruptions, like AI. We watch economic trends, like inflation. We consider environmental pressures, political shifts, the legal framework, rising ethical standards, and finally, demographic changes. Together, these 8 forces create the weather system your strategy has to navigate, and having a blind spot in any one of these can sink the entire ship.
Now we zoom in from that big macro environment to our specific industry. And the very first thing we need to measure is its competitive intensity. So what's that? Well, to put it simply, how hard or easy is it to actually be profitable in this business? This one measurement defines the boundaries and the limits of any strategy we might possibly choose. And to measure that intensity, we turn to the timeless framework from Michael Porter, the 5 forces. It's a way of understanding who holds the power in any given industry. We look at the rivalry among the players already there. Is it a cutthroat battle? We look at the threat of new entrants. How easy is it for someone new to come in and challenge you? The threat of substitutes. Could a totally different product make you obsolete? And finally, the bargaining power of both your buyers and your suppliers. By analyzing these 5 forces, you can map the true profit potential of your industry and figure out where you can actually win. This brings us to the final and honestly the most important part of our analysis. This is the moment of synthesis. It's where all the hard work we've done, looking inward and looking outward, finally comes together to reveal our true strategic path. This right here is the art of strategy. Finding the strategic fit is all about the disciplined matching of our internal capabilities, our VRIO-validated competencies, and our real cultural assumptions with the external opportunities and realities that we mapped out with STEEPLED and the 5 forces. This intersection, this is where a winning strategy is born. It's not just about what we want to do, it's about what we are uniquely capable of doing in the world as it actually is. And look, if there is one single thing to take away from this entire explainer, it's this. Analysis does something truly magical. It turns a dream into a validated plan. It takes that grand direction we set and it confirms our intent, but it also clarifies every single trade-off we have to be willing to make for that plan to become a reality. So there you have it. You now have the complete reality check layer of your strategic operating system. In our next explainer, we get to move to the really exhilarating part. Layer 4, choice. This is where we define the actual competitive logic of how we're going to win. So if you're building your own SOS, make sure you subscribe so you don't observe this mechanism. The energy starts wide and chaotic, but the structure channels it into a single sharp vector. In episode 1, we defined identity, who the player is. In episode 2, we set direction, the goal pulling us forward. But a goal requires a map of the actual terrain. Today, we face that terrain. We call this layer of the strategic operating system the institutional reality check. Analysis separates a grounded plan from a belief system. When a strategy lacks rigorous data, it functions as an ideology rather than a roadmap. This analytical filter shifts an organization from a footing of aspiration to one grounded in empirical evidence. It takes the infinite possibilities a company could pursue and identifies the bounded, legitimate strategic space where they can actually operate. Without this mechanism, visionary direction lacks the evidence required to survive the complexities of the market. To build this filter, we begin with an internal audit, cataloging the actual assets of the strategy. At the baseline are resources. These are the inputs you control, from tangible cash and equipment to intangible patents and brand equity. This 3D schematic shows how those inputs stack. Above resources, we build capabilities and competencies, the functional skills and organized processes used to put resources to work. A core competency is a distinctive structural strength that provides a specific advantage over the rest of the market. A competency is only defensible if it passes the VRIO test. VRIO is a framework that asks if an asset is valuable, rare, inimitable, meaning difficult for competitors to copy, and organized to capture value. Internal assets only offer a genuine advantage when they survive this 4-part validation. Yet, even validated assets lose their utility if the organization cannot adapt when the environment shifts. Look at how this team immediately adjusts to an external shift. This represents dynamic capabilities,
the meta skill to sense shifts, seize opportunities, and transform processes in real time. Sensing requires a continuous scan of the horizon to identify emerging threats and opportunities before they affect the balance sheet. Seizing and transforming provide the operational capacity to reconfigure the internal core, capturing new opportunities without disrupting existing operations. Think of dynamic capabilities as the operating system's update mechanism, preventing VRIO-tested assets from becoming obsolete. Internal assets are often limited by cultural alignment, which acts as a structural variable in execution. This diagram illustrates Edgar Schein's model. Culture operates across 3 distinct structural depths, wrapping around our internal core. The surface contains artifacts, the visible structures, processes, and daily behaviors observable to anyone in the organization. Beneath that are espoused values, the stated strategies, philosophies, and goals that leadership formally publishes. At the deepest level lie the underlying assumptions. These are the unconscious beliefs that actually govern day-to-day behavior. If leadership dictates a direction requiring rapid agility, but the underlying cultural assumption is that stability equals safety, the two will clash. In any conflict between stated strategy and underlying assumptions, the assumptions typically override the strategy, leading to execution failure. Once the internal core is audited, strategy must map the external reality where execution takes place. This topographical map represents the STEEPLED framework, a scan of the macro environment. We map 4 forces: social norms, the pace of technological disruption, economic volatility, and environmental sustainability pressures. We complete the grid with political stability, legal mandates, ethical standards, and demographic shifts. The first half of these forces defines what is commercially and technologically possible, identifying the raw external opportunities and threats. The second half defines what is permissible, representing the boundaries set by law, societal expectations, and labor market demographics. Each node on this grid represents a potential disruption. Overlooking a shift in demographic trends or legal mandates creates a blind spot that can lead to a loss of social or legal legitimacy. From the macro environment, we zoom down to the immediate battleground, the industry. This boundary box represents the industry. To measure competitive intensity, we use Porter's 5 forces. First, we examine the internal pressure, the baseline rivalry among existing competitors fighting for market share. Next, we map the horizontal threats. These are new entrants breaching the market and substitute products that risk making the entire industry obsolete. Finally, we measure vertical leverage. This is the power of buyers to demand lower prices and suppliers to extract higher costs. The collective pressure of these 5 forces maps the structural profit potential of an industry, defining the limits of strategic positioning. All preceding analysis leads to one objective: finding the precise geometry of strategic fit. Look at how the pieces connect. Strategic fit is the intersection where validated internal strength meets mapped external reality. Strategy requires matching organizational capability to environmental opportunity through disciplined execution. This analytical layer converts a visionary dream into a grounded plan, clarifying every necessary trade-off we must accept for survival. With reality checked, the next step is choice, defining the actual competitive logic required to win. Subscribe to continue building your complete strategic operating system. We will see you in episode 4.
Visual illustrations as learning aid.